Hello, everyone. As Shana mentioned, my name is Matt Schultz, and it's great to be here today. I appreciate you all taking your time out to join this webinar about head-up display characterization from 2D to AR solutions. For those of you who don't know, Radiant Vision Systems is a 2D metrology equipment manufacturer, meaning that we specialize in scientific-grade solutions on an imaging plane for characterizing various applications that emit light, whether we're talking about consumer electronics, automotive-based applications on the interior, exterior vehicle, aerospace components, solid-state lighting, or even projector-based technology. Radiant fundamentally has a solution to characterize all light-emitting applications. So let's get into the bulk of what we're going to talk about today. So we're going to start off by talking about the state of head-up displays. So we'll go through 2D, 3D, and augmented reality, which are the primary types of head-up display technologies we see. Then we'll move on to looking at simplifying the head-up display testing platform itself. So why are there benefits around using a single camera measurement system versus using multiple measurement tools? The benefits and flexibility you get out of an electronically controlled lens within your system, and why resolution and depth of field are becoming more prominent as a requirement for looking at head-up displays as the technology advances. After that, we'll wrap things up with a software demonstration where we'll highlight 3 specific components that exist within our TrueTest HUD platform. So we'll look at measuring contrast, characterizing distortion in 2 specific ways, and even looking at testing ghost effects that we see prominently in different head-up display technologies. So the state of head-up displays is constantly changing. So we'll look at what exists today and sort of what the road ahead looks like. When we look at head-up displays and we think of them as a technology, they have 3 primary benefits and attributes, or requirements, I should say. So one is to be able to project information to a driver to improve the safety interaction with the driver, the vehicle, and the road. The other is to ensure that all relevant information is properly presented across various ambient conditions. Cars are driven at daytime sunlight and dusk, obviously, so that information needs to be widely present. And then finally, it's to allow the driver to remain focused on the road while viewing the appropriate information that traditionally you would have to take your eyes off the road to see, whether it be your speedometer or information that primarily might have been in the center stack of the vehicle. So if we look at the path forward in head-up displays, there are a couple different types of technologies. When we look at the information coming off of the windshield, we look at a variety of different changes that could exist. So if we look at the left-hand side of the image here, we see a more traditional-based head-up display where we're presenting information in a 2D fixed orientation. So information is presented at a fixed distance. However, we're looking at moving away from just providing limited information like a speedometer gauge or map gauge, and we're looking at taking stuff from the instrument cluster, the center console, and other aspects of the vehicle and really putting it in the driver's field of view. However, as we put more and more information, as you can see on the left-hand side image in the driver's field of view, things start to get cumbersome. If we look at the right-hand side, which is basically the future of head-up displays, I would say, which is augmented reality, we can see that we can add additional depth to the information. We can look at interacting with the objects outside of the vehicle, and we can map information to several different planes, which creates a more intuitive process for providing the driver with information. Head-up display technology can be best understood by identifying the rational hierarchy. So what kind of head-up displays are we dealing with? When we look at the industry today, we primarily look at 2 types. So from a projection perspective, we have traditional, which is basically fixed information in an XYZ plane. However, the other side of that coin is augmented reality, where we have variable information also presented in XYZ space. But this information could be presented at 2 meters, similar to a traditional or conventional head-up display, but that information also could go out to 10 or 20 meters, really encompassing and interacting with the surrounding environment that the driver sees on the road. From there, we break down dimensionality of the image. So we're looking at 2D image where the information is flat, as well as a 3D image which has depth and curvature to it. However, you can also have a 3D image on a traditional 2D or a traditional conventional head-up display, and you can have a 2D information presented in augmented reality head-up displays. When we move on from there, we see the type of technology that actually projects this information. So we're looking at laser-based technology, displays, so primarily TFTs, and projectors like DLP technology. These are the three fundamental technologies that are currently in production today. However, there is a fourth, and we won't get into it, but it is holographic technology. That is something that's becoming quite interesting in the industry, but really hasn't been widely tested at this point in time. This hierarchy of head-up displays yields several possible combinations, which manifest as different head-up display types with unique optical characteristics. We look at a couple examples of each of these in the slides coming up. It's worth noting, however, that we do have several examples of projection types that are different from the actual integrations. For instance, creating 3D or AR projections using laser-based technology is particularly difficult given that lasers use a single beam source to produce the image, which is best performed at creating 2D fixed augmented solutions for head-up displays. That said, the concept of using lasers for more advanced 3D or augmented reality applications is something that is widely in the pipe. On the other hand, DLP projector technology or TFT displays are widely used in production today and are generally used in fixed depth to augmented reality in 2D and 3D planes for head-up display technologies. Each of the head-up displays has benefits and drawbacks, as well as unique measurement challenges, which we're going to further discuss as we go through this presentation. So a traditional head-up display projects information at a fixed distance, and generally speaking in the industry today, we look at that information between 2 and 4 meters. Up until now, most of that information tends to be in a 2D orientation without three-dimensional depth. However, we are seeing the market look to adapt some new unique aspects to a conventional HUD. If we look at the information on the right-hand side of the screen, we'll see an aftermarket head-up display. And the aftermarket head-up displays are looking to do something unique as well, where they're combining 2D imagery and 3D imagery to create a more appealing image for the driver while they're going through the process of navigating their vehicle. Head-up displays are used to create a safer environment for drivers. And if we look at the existing technology for conventional head-up displays, there are still some problems with it. So where the information is being projected at a fixed distance, the driver's not actually being able to interact or conceive the information of the surrounding vehicle, which means they are looking at the information, let's say, of the speedometer while they're driving, but they're also having to peer and look around within their field of view at the rest of the information on the exterior, on the exterior of the car. This limits their response time from shifting from looking at the head-up display to the environment that they're driving within. Augmented reality has the idea of removing that aspect. So to overcome some of the limitations that we see in traditional HUDs, a new technology, augmented reality, basically has been created. Some people refer it to as HUD 2.0 or other next generation terms, but primarily the terminology that's used in the automotive space today is augmented reality head-up displays. The benefit of this technology is it uses multiple sensors on the interior and exterior of the vehicle to allow the vehicle and the driver to interact with the surrounding environment. As you can see on the left-hand side, there's a concept from Continental where basically you're looking at the roadway and you can see that the head-up display environment is actually directly interacting with the vehicle ahead, showing information like the driver's speed, but also its lane path, as well as the distance to the upcoming vehicle. On the right-hand side, we have a 3D concept from Toyota, which basically shows navigation and how it can directly interact with the real-world environment. And you can see that this image has three-dimensional depth to it, adding a far more interesting and intuitive look to the overall experience. The benefits of augmented reality HUDs. So there's important differentiators between augmented reality HUDs as compared to traditional fixed position head-up displays for their ability to address focal distances and situational changes outside of the vehicle. In a traditional head-up display, all the information is static and fixed at the projected distances I previously had mentioned being 2 to 4 meters. However, with augmented reality, the information is projected from 2 to 20 meters. So there's a lot of potential additional interactions that the driver has the ability to keep now within their line of sight. The characteristics that make up an augmented reality head-up display can be quite complex to design, and due to their complex design, it can mean the measurement process to characterize these devices also increases with complexity. And looking at increased depth of field, resolution, and field of view become extremely important for characterizing this new technology. So I mentioned before that there are three primary types of technologies that make up head-up displays: lasers, TFTs, and DLPs. So laser-based technology basically looks at a laser diode system from a PGU unit that basically uses a single beam projection. The laser beam shoots onto a micromirror plate which reflects and steers the laser beam to a translucent film attached to the windshield, which then distributes the image out at a fixed distance. Generally speaking, we're using traditional and conventional HUDs, as I mentioned, so somewhere between 2 and 4 meters. There are some significant benefits to laser-based head-up display components. So one, from a form factor and the integration into the vehicle, they use much smaller components. They have a lower energy draw, which actually saves space in the interior of the vehicle over the dashboard component. Because they use low energy but have a high output of power, we get extreme luminance capability, so a very bright image is capable. And based on the scattering principles of a laser reflecting off a mirror, there's the capability to create extremely large field of view. One of the things that people are really interested in laser-based technology for right now is looking at windscreen applications, where basically you're looking at taking up a much larger field of view over the windshield itself, versus a conventional HUD, which might be 5 degrees of the driver's field of view. However, there are challenges when it comes to the technology that exists for lasers today. Because laser technology uses a single beam source to produce its images, at this light directed toward the windshield, its refraction causes relatively low clarity compared to other head-up displays right now. This can result in low clarity, fuzzy images, low sharpness, and a reduction in resolution. But one of the other things we're seeing when we talk to customers who are working with this technology is that they see a large implementation or deviation of their technology in regards to creating ghosting effects. And ghosting effects is something that all head-up displays suffer from, but we're seeing large challenges with laser technology at this point in time. Another challenge that is extremely unique only to laser technology, though, is speckle. So this is a granular pattern that results when the laser light source is diffusely reflected from the surface. Like a mirror, as the viewing angle changes, visual interference is noticeable and the speckle pattern changes. To characterize this, and the goal of qualifying it essentially, what we want to do is basically look at the uniformity of the information being presented. So we can actually go through and use an imaging solution and test and look at the luminance uniformity of the speckle distribution to get a feel for what is visually acceptable in different resolution situations. So if we look at TFTs, TFTs are the most basic, most traditional, and the longest standing technology when it comes to head-up displays. They've been around since the 80s when GM first started implementing them. And the process here is very similar to laser, where you have your PGUs. So this is a picture generating unit, which basically is projecting information out to a mirror. So this mirror can be flat or convex in its first diffraction. And then that information is reflected onto a rotating concave mirror. From there, similar to the laser, it passes through a set of films and diffusers onto the windshield and is projected out at its fixed distance, or in other applications that are using augmented reality at variable distances. TFTs are the most widely known technology for several reasons. One, they're the easiest to implement at this point in time, and the technology is widely available. We're seeing them used in obviously traditional head-up displays, 3D, and augmented reality. The benefit of TFT display technology is that it's well understood, and there are several regulations in place when it comes to automotive from a longevity perspective, which is something that automotive applications always suffer from when they introduce new technologies. Life cycle is always crucial, and we know that any display needs to be looking at a life cycle from 7 to 10 years. The other big benefit is reliable color distribution. Since the displays can be tuned and calibrated on the fly during a production process, you can ensure that accurate, bright, beautiful information is being presented in the head-up display's projection. That said, there are limitations that we see with TFTs versus the other technologies as well. So the major limitations that we see with TFT displays is that the luminance output can be a drawback. So in order to exceed or increase the luminance distribution and output from the device, we have to drive a lot of power to the device. The problem with driving an increased amount of power means that we could end up with shifts in color accuracy from the expected distribution. And this is something that I've talked to several different automotive head-up display manufacturers, and there are several different things in works today to help deal with this situation, but ultimately it is the most immediate drawback, which is creating a bright enough image to deal with various ambient light conditions. The other one that we see right now is sometimes, depending on the size of the TFT that's being used or the convention of the distribution from the combiner unit, we can end up with a limited field of view. And this is basically coming back to a limitation based on the source display itself. But this obviously is not widespread for every device that's out there. And then finally, we look at DLP projector-based technology. So with DLP projector-based technology, we're looking at the electronics processing unit push information to the DMD, which projects the image onto a stationary image plane called the diffuser screen. The HUD optics then magnify the image to project it onto the windshield, where the information is reflected and presented within the driver's eye box. DLP projection technologies for head-up displays rely on a digital micromirror display, or DMD, an optical microelectrical mechanical system that enables spatial light modulation. Each DMD contains up to 8 million individually controlled micromirrors built on top of an associated CMOS memory cell. Improper mapping of the image with the DMD mirror array can cause modulation between contrasting areas of the image. This manifests as spatial frequency, so noise or blurriness that we might see in the image, in the projection as the contrasting areas get closer, reducing visible resolution and contrast. And this is sort of one of the biggest issues that we see with DLP projection technologies at this point is that alignment process, and we'll talk about it a little further. However, let's talk about the benefits. The benefits is that this technology is easily used for all types of head-up displays, so augmented reality, 3D, 2D, and anything that we might see coming out of the future. The DLP chips themselves are quite small and extremely powerful, which offer some potentials for space and cost savings during the implementation into the vehicle. Due to their capabilities for wide distribution, they have the ability to be used for large field of view head-up displays. The chipsets that we see in the marketplace today are very similar to cinema-based projection technology, which means we understand the capabilities for luminance output. We know that they have the benefit of saturated colors and potentially could offer the best contrast ratio out of the three technologies. That said, like all technologies, we'll talk about their limitations. The biggest limitation we see is basically misalignment of the DMD chipset to the array itself and projection platform. And this misalignment leads to the biggest abnormalities we might see with the technology, which is clarity and sharpness drop-offs, ghosting, and primary distortion. So with DLP projection technology, it is relatively new into the market. There are only a few vehicles that are fully into manufacturing and production right now that are using DLP chips. However, there's a huge benefit for this technology going forward, but there are a lot of challenges that need to be overcome. And using a test measurement platform can ensure that you have the ability to use this new technology, but also ensure the appropriate quality is being met. And we'll talk about that measurement system in the coming slides. So optical measurements, similarities and differences from 2D to augmented reality. So when we look at head-up displays across all technologies, there are fundamental measurement requirements that we see for all of them. Every single head-up display needs to have a verification for luminance, chromaticity, uniformity, contrast, advanced things like pixel defects or line defects, modulation transfer function, which I'll refer to as MTF going forward, ghosting, distortion, warping, and eye box limitations. However, each of the technologies might have a slightly different focus or requirement coming out of these tests. If we look at augmented reality head-up displays where there's a lot of variability and extreme depth of field, things like distortion, ghosting, and MTF might play a larger play, as well as eye box limitations as an example. So the key differences in head-up display measurements comes with meeting the new demands of the image distance, resolution, and field. So when we look at traditional head-up displays, we see that they have a limited projection depth, which I've talked about already, usually within a few meters, but could be up to 4 meters as an example. These images don't respond to the exterior environment and basically are static in regards to the information that is being updated. If we look at augmented reality systems, though, on the other hand, these are responsive and they interact with generally most objects on the exterior of the vehicle, and there's constant change in the information that's being presented, and that information is changing over a much larger field of view. So resolution becomes extremely important on a measurement systems requirement side, as well as being able to characterize information at different working distances and in larger depths of field. If we break down traditional head-up displays and augmented reality HUDs, we can look at them very quickly in this measurement challenge screen. So we can see that from a luminance draw, the maximum luminance output generally is about 10,000 candelas per meter squared. However, with an augmented reality system, we can see that it's 3 times as high, but the distance is also 4 times larger on a maximum side, meaning that it makes complete sense that you would need to drive a higher luminance output from these devices. When we look at the display size or the field of view, you can also see there's quite a large difference between them as we shift from a traditional unit to augmented reality. We see the same basic demands in head-up display measurements as the systems become more diverse. It's less about what we want to capture and more about how we want to actually capture that information. As display size and field of view increase, spatial measurements become more important. In other words, being able to capture images on a complete head-up display projection across a broad spatial area is extremely relevant. As image distance becomes more variable to match the depths of actual objects, let's say out to 20 meters in the case of augmented reality, we need an imaging system that has the capabilities and flexibility to adjust the focus based on the information being presented. And finally, display resolution. So the resolution of the head-up display that's being projected and the resolution of the measurement system you're looking at should be in line, meaning that the measurement platform you're using to characterize the head-up display should have a much higher resolution to be able to appropriately identify and characterize the information projected at the furthest distances, let's say in an augmented reality head-up display. So let's talk about simplifying head-up display testing, so solving the challenges that we see across this technology. So the first problem is that you actually require several different pieces of equipment, generally speaking, to go through the full characterization process. So you need to characterize your head-up display from a metrology perspective, so looking at things like luminance and color. You also need to understand, let's say, the projection distance, the image size of the information, distortion, ghosting that might be apparent within your technology, and finally, if you don't want to move your information, your test information from point to point, you need a solution that can characterize all of this in sort of a single shot that can analyze the full field of view of the distribution of your head-up display. So from a metrology perspective, head-up displays require something that can provide you absolute luminance or chromaticity. And generally speaking, what we see in the industry is something that is photometrically calibrated. We've seen people use spot-based technologies to imaging photometers and imaging colorimeters. On the gauging side, so let's say the geometrical side, where you're wanting to understand the dimensions of the information being presented, you want to understand how your projection information is being viewed, so the distortion of the image, the warping of the information, or any alignment or abnormalities from a ghosting perspective need to be identified. And in the industry today, generally speaking, we see human inspection offer this capability, or something like a machine vision camera. And then when it comes to full field of view, basically where we want to characterize things like contrast, uniformity, mirror as an example, or potential line defects, generally speaking, you would either use an imaging-based platform or you would use a spot-based solution on a robotic arm and moving it to several different points. But this encompasses a lot of additional time. So the industry today, if we go back a few years ago, was using, let's say, a robotic arm with a spot-based solution and a machine vision camera. So you're using 3 primary types of technologies to allow you to characterize all of the components that we just went over. However, if we look at simplifying that process, we could actually use one measurement solution. So an imaging photometer or an imaging colorimeter from Radiant Vision Systems allows you to greatly reduce the time from a configuration perspective in regards to taking your measurements, setting up your parameters, and properly analyzing your head-up display projection. The information, the solutions that Radiant Vision Systems offers combines those three platforms that I had previously mentioned, the metrology aspect, the gauging aspect, and the full field of view capabilities. And the system that we generally see being used today is the I-Series from Radiant Vision Systems. So this is a tri-stimulus-based imaging colorimeter with varying different resolutions. So Radiant offers solutions from 2 to 29 megapixels. We have a 4-filter based system platform with a secondary filter wheel built in for neutral density filters, which is perfect for head-up displays because head-up displays are being driven at extremely large luminance outputs, which means saturation to the sensor is possible. So by incorporating neutral density filters into the measurement platform, we can adjust the filters based on the light distribution of the head-up display itself. And then finally, the electronically controlled lens is what gives us our flexibility when characterizing at different working distances and looking at different depths of field for analyzing the information presented in the head-up display. So all this brings together is an all-in-one system for truly characterizing head-up displays, and really the only platform today on the market that offers such a thing. So what about augmented reality and 3D HUDs? Does the same measurement system work for all of these? Of course it does. The answer is an obvious yes. It all comes down to getting the information out of the head-up display and focusing and applying the measurement, analysis, or the appropriate methods to the information that's being presented. This is facilitated using a system that offers various f-stops. So when I talked about the electronic lens earlier, we have the ability to change the f-stop on the lens. So whether we're looking at f2.8 to f8 to f11, f16, or higher based on the calibration of the lens, we can adjust the depth of field of our focus based on the information that's being presented. And since this is electronically controlled and can be programmed, this is something that fits very well into an automation platform for characterizing everything from your traditional conventional head-up display to information out to 20 meters with advanced technologies like augmented reality. So as we've observed, there's a major complexity when it comes to head-up display measurements and the way we deal with different instances and traditional information from a conventional head-up display to an augmented reality head-up display and the information that's being projected. While a traditional head-up display only requires measurements to be taken generally in a single depth and in limited positions, augmented reality HUDs require variable depth and location and flexibility capture images anywhere along the infinite plane. So again, anywhere from sort of 1 meter out to 20 meters as an example. So we're going to talk about simplifying that focus process. So I mentioned a couple times already the electronic lens and the ability to change things like the f-stop. So when we pair the electronically controlled lens with our I-Series or Y-Series systems, we increase the flexibility from a focal perspective. This allows us to adjust things like the working distance for focus and adjust the depth of field to mitigate any issues that we might be seeing in characterizing information in the head-up display at varying distances. A big aspect is removing human error from a calculation perspective, but also reducing any type of manual-based projection or verification information from characterizing distance. So as you can see in this slide on the left-hand side, when we adjust things like the focal length or we adjust the working distance, we're actually changing the focal plane for which the camera focuses in on. And on the right-hand side, you can see an example as that changes, we have a focus bar basically increasing its capabilities from a focus level and seeing basically a histogram cutoff showing a proper alignment. So when we look at resolution and depth, we see several different problems. As we focus farther out on the infinite plane, achieving clear images at relatively small scale requires a greater image resolution. Capturing images as far out as 20 meters and evaluating them from a visual perspective can require precise coordinates. If details are missed, this can impact the accuracy of our measurement. An imaging system should match or exceed the resolution of a head-up display projection to ensure that the projection itself is evaluated in the exact same detail as it's being produced. This is especially critical for image clarity testings, things like modulation transfer function, as well as looking at characterization of distortion, warping, ghosting, and other defects. So simplifying depth of field. High-resolution imaging is important for all head-up display applications, and generally speaking, we recommend 16 megapixels and beyond. Using a high-resolution imaging system, we can eliminate the resolution effects that the test system itself might isolate on the head-up display projection. So here we're looking at modulation transfer function as a test, and we're basically looking at line pairing. What we don't want to have happen is end up with a low-resolution camera system trying to characterize a high-resolution output. We want to ensure that the information that's being projected and being characterized is properly conceived by the measurement device itself. So ensuring that you have twice the resolution or 3 times the resolution of the output is basically a rule of thumb that we've seen being acceptable sort of on a global perspective when it comes to head-up display characterization. And Radiant offers solutions from 16 to 29 megapixels and more in the future potentially. So let's go through sort of a software demonstration. So we talked a little bit about the I-Series as a solution for the measurement side of things, but that's just the hardware component. We need to talk about the software component and what Radiant basically has created to allow you to have one test platform to analyze all aspects of your head-up display. And this platform is called TrueTest, and it's a specific module that was created by Radiant called TT HUD that allows us to characterize all aspects of the existing technology in head-up displays today, whether we're looking at uniformity, luminance, chromaticity, pixel level defects, modulation transfer function, ghosting, warping, various levels of distortion and contrast. The whole process is built into a turnkey platform that truly allows you flexibility to understand the information that's being projected out of your device under test. Customizable parameters, various pass-fail criteria, exportation of information, an open API. These are all flexible aspects that make TrueTest HUD a great software solution encompassing any head-up display application. So when we look at contrast, there are a couple different contrast solutions that we offer basically within the TrueTest HUD platform. But the idea basically is that you want to be able to measure the optical contrast of your head-up display to ensure that you can maintain image visibility when information is superimposed based on the surroundings, but also be able to distinguish different elements and improve color distinctions of the information being presented. So, measuring contrast, there's a few different ways. And in a demo that's coming up, we're going to show basically a unique aspect that's available in head-up displays, which is basically a diamond board, checkerboard. But we have more traditional methods for looking at contrast, things like checkerboard contrast, diamond like I just mentioned, sequential, which is probably the most noticeable one that we see in traditional displays, and then inverse checkerboard. One of the nice benefits about the Radiant solution is we also offer stray light correction algorithms when it comes to contrast and checkerboard measurement application, which is something that allows us to ensure appropriate information is actually being characterized. And thanks to the high dynamic range of the imaging technology that we offer, we can ensure that we're measuring accurate contrast levels across any application. So here we have basically our software. So what we're doing is we're opening up our diagonal checkerboard and we're showing that we have the flexibility to dictate how many rows and columns of information we want to be presented. Then we have our detector size, we have our min contrast ratio from an acceptability perspective, and here we would have the ability to input a stray light correction factor. In this situation, we haven't applied any. So we'll run the sequence, and what the sequence is going to do is it's actually going to drive an image and go through the analysis platform. So here you can see that we've actually plotted points across basically the white section and the black section, which is hard to see. But you'll see in the tabular area that we have information for the average white luminance, the average black luminance of this areas, and then we basically compute the contrast ratio. And for each of the diagonal checkerboard components, there's actually information located in the analysis window. And again, all of this information can be exported. When we look at distortion, which is another test that exists within the TrueTest platform, we're looking to evaluate whether an image's dimensions or locations are accurate, whether there's any abnormality or missing information, let's say, in the eye box or the field of view from the driver's perspective. So TrueTest benefits from a measurement platform perspective is that we basically will characterize the information. We'll be able to locate and give you information on the centroid for the X, Y locations of the specific information. We're looking at measuring deviations from points to point over all vertices, and we can create an intuitive pass-fail response and capabilities based on different levels of acceptability. Identifying if there are any areas within the field of view that are missing is also something that many customers have requested that we add to the platform, and it's something that we've recently adopted. And the two primary test platforms we look at when we're actually going through measuring distortion are a dot and line grid test pattern. We'll actually show both of those in the short demonstration. So here we have our distortion dot grid. So we're opening up the analysis window again, and we're showing the expected columns and rows that we're looking at having distributed. We can choose whether we want to look at information in physical units or whether we want information based on the CCD image from a pixel perspective. We can create measurement thresholds and minimum blob acceptances, but where it gets more interesting is the ability to pass-fail the information based on maximum or minimum column and row spacing. So we can literally set pass-fail criteria on the acceptability of the distortion limitations. The same thing can be said for the distortion line grid. So again, here we're showing the different cross sections, so how many diagonal block sizes that we're actually looking at, so how many cross sections in each column and row. We're looking at whether we want to verify different pass-fail criteria, again, showing above limitations and below limitations. So you'll see it when we actually show up the image. If the limitation for acceptability from a spacing perspective exceeds the qualifications that you set forth for the acceptability in a pass-fail scenario, you're going to see that it's highlighted in red, and vice versa, highlighted in blue if it is below that expectation, green if it's met the requirements. So here we're actually going into the dot matrix platform. So if we zoom in, we can see that we're giving you a bunch of information, the pixel location, the X, Y coordinate, and we're showing you basically the corresponding lines between each intersecting point. All of this information is actually available in the analysis window. Then as we move on to the line grid pattern, we're going to show you something a little different. So each intersection is created with a point of interest, and again, very similar to the dot matrix platform. But however, one of the differences in this image is you can see that there are blue and red lines. The red lines, again, showing that the spacing between these two corresponding points has exceeded the acceptability limit. If we bring up the analysis window, we can see that there are several lines that are highlighted in red and green. Green being it has passed the specific requirements set forth, and red meaning that it has ended up in a failed situation. So ghosting is one of the more complex things when it comes to testing head-up displays, and something that primarily has either been used for human inspection, as I mentioned, or machine vision. Radiant has a platform and solution for testing ghosting, for looking at inconsistencies in information that's being projected and any shifting in abnormalities, similar to what we might see with TFTs, DLPs, and laser-based technologies. So the benefit of TrueTest HUD is that it's really the only photometric imaging solution that's on the market today that actually allows you to verify ghosting. There are no other platforms that exist within the field of metrology equipment that allows you such a robust, intuitive platform for characterizing head-up display components. The ability to measure multiple ghosts simultaneously is an added benefit. Looking at the output luminance of the ghost and the distance from the primary true virtual image, we'll call it, to the primary or secondary ghost is also something the software is able to report out, which gives you primarily all the information that you might need when looking at understanding what your projection limitations might be. So if we go through the ghosting algorithm, we'll bring it up. And again, you'll see the different parameters. And all of our software is very similar in that you have the flexibility to edit the parameters for each analysis. So whether we're looking at the percentage of max luminance from a parameter perspective for characterizing the ghosting, to the minimum, to the physical size of the ghost that we want to detect, to whether we want to create pass-fail criteria for max luminance, minimum displacement, minimum luminance ratio, etc. There's a lot of flexibility in how you actually want to create the pass-fail criteria for your information. Again, all of the raw data is going to be presented at all times and available for exportation, but TrueTest and all of its software analyses gives you flexibility in how you want to characterize that information. So here we're going to show 3 images. The first image is going to be an image where we have no ghosts available. The second image will show a single ghost, and the third will also show a single ghost off the primary, but there will be separation distances between image 2 and 3. So if we zoom into this area, you can see what our software does is that we've gone through and we've identified the corresponding points in the image. If we go into the second image, you can see that there are multiple points. You can see that there's a ghost effect happening on the upper right side of the initial point. And what our software has done is it's identified the point, it's told us the luminance value and the distance from the true virtual image. In this third image, we're showing that the software can not only detect ones that have overlapping areas, but also ones with much larger separation. And again, all of the information from a separation perspective, a luminance perspective, and coordinate perspective is all available within the analysis results window. So when we look at a complete solution for characterizing head-up displays, we're basically looking at something very similar here. So whether you care about color or you're only looking at monochromatic information, Radiant offers the hardware capabilities coupled with the software capabilities to truly offer you a turnkey platform, whether you're looking at the R&D phase, quality assurance, or even end-of-line production testing. The platform that Radiant has presented and developed is pushed and created to basically help encompass all aspects of the head-up display product lifecycle. And with resolutions ranging again from 2 to 29 megapixels, with calibrated tri-stimulus filters, with built-in neutral density filters, with the electronic lens, and an extremely versatile software platform, you really get the only turnkey platform solution that exists on the market that utilizes one software platform and one piece of hardware to encompass all aspects of your measurement criteria. So in summary, regardless of whether we're looking at 2D, 3D, or augmented reality head-up display units, we can simplify the measurement process using calibrated photometric equipment to capture the visual information using a single camera solution, with the flexibility of the electronic controlled lens for adjusting to different working distances or projection distances and characterizing larger depths of field, whether we're talking about information in a traditional head-up display from 2 to 4 meters or out to 2 to 20 meters. In an augmented reality head-up display, there's no limitations when it comes to characterizing that capability thanks to the benefits of an electronic lens. Resolution, as I've mentioned many times, is extremely important, and looking at increased depth of field and changes in focus distances or even larger fields of view is something where resolution becomes extremely apparent and an important process of the characterization. And then again, wrapping it up, that we built a specific software test platform to address the head-up display industry, as this is an emerging industry, one that's growing significantly year over year, actually doubling in volume from last year to this year, and with projections out to 2021. It's an area that Radiant feels that we need to quickly address, and we want to be the appropriate solutions provider for head-up displays. And we think that with our hardware and software, we really have the capabilities of characterizing any defects, abnormalities, and creating various pass-fail criteria based on the requirements we see in head-up display technologies today. So I thank you for your time, and now I guess we'll look to open it for questions.